forest stretched endlessly, an ancient mass of gnarled trees and whispering leaves. It was the kind of place that felt untouched by time, where the wind carried secrets from centuries past. The small group of tourists, 5 in total, had ventured deep into the woods, following an old hiking trail that few dared to use. The brochures had promised breathtaking views and a serene escape from modern life. They had not mentioned the feeling of being watched. It was late afternoon when the first scream tore through the silence, a long, agonized wail that seemed to shake the very air. Birds erupted from the treetops in frantic flight, and every sound of the forest seemed to halt, as if holding its breath. The hikers froze. They exchanged uneasy glances, scanning the dense foliage. The sound had been distant, but unmistakably human. It hadn't been an animal. It hadn't been the wind. It had been someone, or something, crying out in pure terror. They hesitated only a moment before deciding to investigate. Pushing forward, they followed the echo of the scream, their boots crunching against the leaf-covered ground. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees loomed taller, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy, casting eerie patterns on the ground. Then they found it. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No indication that anyone had ever been there. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. The scream had come from this direction, but the forest offered no answers. The group stood motionless for a while, waiting, listening, but no second cry followed. As dusk began to settle, they reluctantly turned back toward their campsite, unease clinging to them like a second skin. None of them spoke of it outright, but the tension was clear in their eyes. Something was wrong with these woods, and the night had yet to fall. The fire crackled in the middle of their campsite, its glow flickering against the twisted shapes of the surrounding trees. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, swaying with the fire's movement, almost as if they were alive. The air had grown cold, much colder than it should have been for early autumn. A thick silence hung over the woods, as though the forest itself was listening. No one wanted to talk about the scream. Not openly, at least. But it was in their eyes, in the way they avoided looking at one another for too long. It had been hours since they heard it, and yet the memory of that horrible, gut-wrenching sound refused to leave them. They tried to distract themselves. Stories were exchanged. Nervous laughter passed around, but every now and then, someone would glance over their shoulder, scanning the darkness. The fire felt like the only thing keeping the night at bay. Then, just as one of them was about to speak, another scream. Closer. It tore through the trees like a blade, high and keening, filled with a terror beyond words. It was human, definitely human, but warped in a way that sent ice through their veins. The voice was breaking, distorting, as if something was being stretched beyond what a body should allow. Every single person in the group jumped to their feet, eyes darting wildly toward the direction of the sound. The firelight barely touched the edge of the forest, leaving the rest of the world swallowed in pitch blackness. No one moved. The scream had been too close, just beyond their camp, just past the reach of the light. One of them, Daniel, fumbled for the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, sweeping back and forth. Trees, rocks, more trees, nothing. And then a branch snapped. They all turned toward the noise, but the light revealed nothing. Just more of the same. Empty forest. Heartbeats thundered in their ears, their breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The silence that followed was worse than the scream itself. The woods had returned to their unnatural stillness. Not even an insect chirped. They should have left. They should have packed their things and run. But they didn't. Instead, they convinced themselves. It's just someone else out there. Another camper. A prankster. An animal that sounded human. They told themselves anything that would let them stay. And so, they forced themselves to sit back down by the fire, forcing laughter, forcing calm. But sleep, that would not come easily. The first to fall asleep was Amelia. She had curled up in her sleeping bag, her back to the fire, mumbling something about it being just exhaustion messing with them. One by one, the others followed, though unease settled in their stomachs like lead. The wind picked up sometime after midnight. It howled through the trees, sending loose leaves scattering across the ground. The fire, once strong, was now just a smoldering heap of embers. Then, at the dead of night, something changed. The air became heavy, thick with something unseen. A presence, the kind that makes your skin prickle, that makes your instincts scream at you to run. And then, another scream. But this time, it wasn't coming from the distance. It was right next to them. It exploded through the air, piercing and raw, as if something was inside their camp, screaming from a throat that had been shredded beyond repair. Panic surged through them. Someone scrambled for the flashlight. The beam swung wildly, illuminating terrified faces and empty woods. No movement. Nothing. But the scream hadn't stopped. It was there, surrounding them, echoing from every direction. It should have faded. A normal scream could not last that long. But this one did. It didn't break. It lingered. A never-ending wail of agony circling the camp, shifting, growing louder, until suddenly, silence. The forest swallowed the sound whole, like it had never been there at all. Breathless, they waited, and waited, but there was nothing left to hear. Then, in a whisper of wind, they realized something. One of them was missing. The moment they realized one of them was missing, the air around them seemed to contract. The fire's dying embers barely provided any light, but it was enough to see that Amelia's sleeping bag lay empty. The zipper was undone, her things still there, but she was gone. No one had heard her leave. They scrambled to their feet, calling her name into the darkness. Their voices seemed to vanish into the trees, swallowed by the unnatural hush of the forest. No response. Only the oppressive silence pressing in from all sides. Daniel grabbed the flashlight, his fingers shaking, as he pointed it toward the edge of the camp. The others huddled together, breaths shallow, scanning the trees for any sign of her. Then they saw it. Not Amelia, but her footprints. They led away from the camp, straight into the woods. Deep impressions in the dirt, like she had walked barefoot, dragging her feet. They looked fresh, too fresh. A creeping dread settled over them. Amelia had always been a cautious hiker. She wouldn't have left in the middle of the night, alone, without shoes. And yet, the evidence was right there, leading away from the safety of the firelight and into the suffocating blackness between the trees. One by one, they turned to each other, waiting for someone to suggest what they all feared. We have to go after her. And so, against every primal instinct screaming at them to run the other way, they followed the footprints. The forest had changed. It no longer felt like the same place they had hiked through earlier that day. The trees were closer now, twisted together unnaturally, their branches dangling overhead like grasping fingers. The trail beneath their feet was uneven, the dirt shifting as though the earth itself wanted to swallow them whole. The footprints continued, but something was wrong. At first they couldn't place it, but as the flashlight beam flickered over the tracks, a terrible realization crept over them. The footprints had changed. They started normal, human, barefoot, dragging slightly. But then, just a few steps ahead, they stretched. The impressions in the dirt became deeper, wider, as though her feet had warped into something larger, something heavier. And then, they stopped. Not a gradual fade, no turning away, just a dead stop in the middle of the path. The forest was silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Then the scream came, not from the distance, not from the trees, but from behind them. They spun around, terror gripping their chests. The flashlight beam wavered, slicing through the dark, searching for the source. Then, in the dim glow, they saw her, Amelia, or at least something that looked like her. She stood at the edge of the path, barefoot, her clothes torn, her hair hanging in tangled strands over her face. But she wasn't right. Her body was too stiff, her limbs too long, her fingers twitching like something trying to remember how to use them. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her mouth hanging open, and from within her throat, the scream poured out. But she wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing, wasn't gasping for air. The sound just kept coming. A raw, endless wail pouring from her lips like something else was inside her, using her body as a vessel. The flashlight flickered. Amelia's head twitched, her neck cracking as she straightened. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, and her eyes. Her eyes were gone, not gouged out, not hollow sockets, just empty. Smooth skin stretched over where they should have been, as if she had never had them to begin with. The scream continued, but now it was coming from somewhere else too. The group barely had time to react before the trees around them began to scream back. From all sides, the night erupted with cries, high-pitched, overlapping, inhuman. The forest itself was wailing, howling, as if 100 voices were trapped inside the trees, their agony woven into the very bark. Something was coming. A shape moved in the darkness behind Amelia. No, many shapes. Tall, wrong, shifting between the trees. Their forms were indistinct, as if they were part of the night itself, slithering between reality and shadow. And then, she moved. Not walked, not ran, glitched. 1 second, she was standing across the path. The next, she was closer. Too fast, too wrong. The scream never stopped. It was inside them now, vibrating in their skulls, drilling into their bones. Daniel dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly, illuminating flashes of skin, of stretching mouths, of gaping, eyeless faces pressed between the trees. And then, darkness. The flashlight died. The screaming stopped. Silence. A vast, empty silence that pressed against the world like a held breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, slowly, one of them gasped awake. Daniel. His eyes snapped open to blinding morning light. He was lying on the forest floor, cold dew soaking into his clothes. The trees around him stood still, indifferent, the air filled with the sounds of birds chirping. His head ached. His body felt hollow, weightless. Where were the others? His breath hitched as he pushed himself up, looking around. Their campsite was gone. The fire, the sleeping bags, the gear, everything. Had it all been a dream? Number. It had happened. He could still feel it in his bones, the echo of the screams rattling in his skull. Then he heard it. A sound so faint, he almost thought he imagined it. Breathing, ragged, shallow, coming from inside his own chest. Number. not his breath. Something else. Then, deep within his throat, he felt it. A tremor, a vibration, a sound waiting to be released. And before he could even think to stop it, the scream burst from his mouth. It wasn't his voice, it was theirs. A chorus of wailing agony, a never-ending cry of terror. The forest screamed through him, using his body, his lungs, his throat as a vessel. Daniel clutched at his face, his fingers running over his skin, searching. And that's when he realized. His eyes were gone. Smooth skin stretched over where they should have been. And the last thing he heard, before the world faded into endless darkness, was the echo of his own inhuman scream. In the distance, deep in the woods, another group of hikers paused on the trail. A scream had just torn through the trees. A long, agonized wail. It sounded close,